Sartre's dark truth. No one cares. And that changes everything. Let me ask you a question that will sound harsh, but it might wake something up inside you. But what if no one actually cares about you, not your success, not your failure, not your dreams, your pain, your hopes, or your legacy? What if, in the grand arena of life, every move we make is seen only briefly, if at all, before it vanishes into a void of disinterest? Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist philosopher, didn't just suspect this. He embraced it. And once you understand what he meant, it could completely change how you live your life. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another dark, depressing philosophical rabbit hole, let me be clear. What Sartre revealed isn't just about despair. It's about liberation. It's about power. And it's about how your life becomes your own, fully, terrifyingly your own, the moment you realize that you're not being watched, judged, or validated by some cosmic audience. The truth is, no one cares by default, and that's not the end of the story. That's the beginning. When Sartre said, "Existence precedes essence," he was flipping a centuries-old story on its head. He meant that we aren't born with a predetermined purpose, a cosmic script, or a divine blueprint. We're thrown into existence first, and only then through our choices, actions, and failures do we create who we are. But here's the kicker: no one else is responsible for giving us meaning. There's no referee, no final judge, no audience applauding or booing our performance. The world doesn't care what we become. And that's exactly why it matters so much that we choose. Think about how much of your life is spent worrying about what others think, what your parents expect, what your friends will say, what strangers online might comment. You hold back from trying something new because it might look foolish. You silence your thoughts because they might sound weird. You conform to avoid judgment. But what if that judgment never actually arrives? What if the people you're so afraid of disappointing are too absorbed in their own inner chaos to even notice your mistakes?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's the dark truth. Most people are too busy worrying about themselves to genuinely care about you. And that's not cruel, it's human. They're not watching your every move. They're watching their own. They're not obsessing over your flaws. They're trapped in their own. And once you see that clearly, you stop living for their approval. You stop censoring yourself in anticipation of some grand review. You start acting not for them, but for you. Sartre called this anguish the realization that we are radically free, that there are no excuses, no divine instructions, no predetermined roles, just us, choosing, acting, failing, creating. And yes, that can feel like a crushing weight. If no one is coming to save us, and no one is truly watching us, then we're alone with our decisions. But that's also where the real power begins. Because if no one is scripting your life, then you are free to write it yourself. Let me ask you again, what would you do if you knew no one genuinely cared? Would you finally take that risk? Would you stop trying to be impressive and start trying to be real? Would you finally admit what you want, not what you're supposed to want, but what actually stirs your soul, even if it sounds insane to everyone else? We live in a culture that's obsessed with being seen. Social media is built on the premise that attention equals value. But Sartre would tell you that being seen doesn't make you real. Choosing does. Every moment you act with authenticity, even when no one notices, is a moment where you become more alive. Every time you break from the script and choose something because it matters to you, you take responsibility for your existence. You become the author, not the actor reading someone else's lines. And here's the twist. The moment you stop needing everyone to care is the moment when some people do start to care, not because you're begging for their attention, but because you become undeniably real. People are drawn to authenticity like gravity. But you can't fake it. You can't perform realness. You have to live it. And that begins by staring into the Sartrean abyss and realizing no one cares, and that changes everything. So here we are, you, me, and this terrifying freedom. What will you do with it? How much of your life has been built on the assumption that someone is watching, someone is judging, someone is keeping score? And what if you drop that illusion fully, completely today? What would you build instead? There's a kind of brutal compassion in Sartre's philosophy. He doesn't offer comfort, he offers truth. But it's the kind of truth that can make you brave. If no one is watching, then you are free to fall without shame, free to rise without applause, free to live not for the spotlight, but for the fire inside you. The burden of freedom, why radical choice is terrifying and necessary. Freedom sounds beautiful until you realize what it actually means. At first glance, it feels like a gift. No rules, no masters, no one telling you what to be or how to think. But Sartre rips the wrapping paper off and reveals the truth hiding beneath the word. Freedom is a burden. It's not a light, airy sensation. It's a weight. A crushing, existential weight that presses down on you the moment you realize that nothing and no one is coming to save you. You are responsible for everything you are, everything you become, and everything you choose not to be. And this is where the terror begins. Because if there's no script, no destiny, and no predetermined role, then you are left with the raw, or unfiltered task of creation, of building your life from scratch, without blueprints, without scaffolding, without a manual. Sartre called this condemned to be free. It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? How can freedom be a condemnation? But think about it. If there is no God, no fixed human nature, and no inherent meaning in the universe, then there are no excuses either. You can't blame biology, fate, tradition, or divine intervention. You can't say, I had no choice, because you do, always. Even when it feels like you don't, you do. Even choosing not to choose is still a choice. And that's terrifying. It means you're responsible for your own failure, in your own mediocrity, your own cowardice. If you live a life that feels fake or hollow or small, you can't pin it on anyone else. That's the burden. That's the horror of radical freedom. But embedded in that horror is also something extraordinary. Possibility. If no one is setting your limits, then you are the one who defines them. If no one is watching, then you get to decide what matters. But your life is not a performance. It's an act of authorship. You write it in real time, with every decision, every action, every refusal to act. And that means your life can become anything. You can destroy it. You can build it. You can reshape it entirely at any moment. The power is yours, which means the responsibility is too. This is why so many people run from freedom. Not because they don't want it, but because it demands too much. It demands courage. It demands self-honesty. It demands that you stop hiding behind roles and expectations and start asking the hardest questions. What do I really want? What kind of person do I want to become? What am I willing to sacrifice to be that person? And here's the thing, most people never ask those questions. They live their entire lives on autopilot, following scripts handed to them by their families, their cultures, their fears. They confuse comfort with meaning, structure with purpose. And then they wonder why they feel numb, why they feel like something's missing. Let me ask you this: what part of your life have you never questioned? What beliefs have you inherited without examination? What dreams are you chasing that aren't even yours? Sartre tells us that we must confront these illusions not gently, but violently. Tear them down. Because only when you strip away the false stories can you begin to write your own. Only when you accept that no one else will define you can you begin to define yourself. But here's the catch: once you become aware of this freedom, you can't go back. You can't unsee it. The excuses stop working. The distractions lose their anesthetic power. You're exposed, naked in the eyes of your own conscience. And that's where the real journey begins, not toward happiness necessarily, but toward authenticity, toward a life that is truly yours. Not easy, not always joyful, but real. So, ask yourself, are you willing to carry the burden of being free? Are you willing to stop waiting for permission, for validation, for someone else to tell you who you are? Are you ready to step into the terrifying, exhilarating space of radical choice? Because once you do, there's no going back. But maybe that's exactly what you need. The myth of meaning, why purpose isn't found. It's made we grow up believing that life has a built-in meaning, like a treasure buried somewhere in the world, waiting to be uncovered. We're told to find our purpose, as if it's some hidden object lying dormant within us, just out of reach but already fully formed. But Sartre obliterates this myth with one brutal truth: there is no meaning until you create it. And that idea, while it sounds devastating at first, is actually the most empowering thing you'll ever hear. Because it means you don't have to wait. You don't have to search endlessly. You don't have to hope the universe delivers some cosmic message explaining who you are and why you're here. You get to decide. You get to make your own meaning, and no one, not the universe, not your parents, not your past, can take that away from you. This is where so many people get stuck. They feel lost, not because there's no purpose, but because they're waiting for someone else to hand it to them. They think meaning is a sign, calling, a destiny. But Sartre would say there is no calling. There is no sign. There is only the blank canvas of existence and the brush in your hand. The meaning of your life is not something you discover, it's something you paint, stroke by stroke, choice by choice, often in the dark, often with trembling hands. And that painting is never finished. But you are always in the act of becoming. You are always in the process of creating who you are. But let me be clear, this isn't about doing whatever you want in some reckless, impulsive way. That's not freedom. That's avoidance. Sartre's philosophy demands responsibility, not indulgence. When you choose your meaning, you are also choosing the consequences. You are declaring, this matters, and then living in alignment with that declaration, even when it's hard. Even when no one understands, even when you fail. That's what makes meaning real, not that it was written in the stars, but that you were willing to suffer for it, to build it, to defend it. Meaning isn't something you stumble upon. It's something you fight for. This is why your purpose has to come from within, not from outside cues. If your meaning is borrowed, it collapses under pressure. But if it's inherited, it won't survive doubt. Only when your purpose is forged in the furnace of your own freedom does it become unshakable. And that purpose doesn't have to be grand or noble or universally admired. It just has to be yours. That's the only criterion. And once it is, it becomes the foundation of your existence. It gives shape to your choices. It gives direction to your freedom. It gives coherence to your chaos. But here's the paradox. To make meaning, you have to first accept that life has none. You have to stare into the void and see it for what it is: empty, indifferent, silent. Only then can you begin to fill it with your voice, your values, your actions. Only then can you say, yes, life is meaningless, and I will build meaning anyway. That's not weakness. That's power. That's rebellion. That's what Sartre meant when he said we are abandoned not in a depressing way, but in a liberating one. We are alone with our freedom, yes, but we are also free to create something beautiful in the face of that aloneness. So, let me ask you, what would you choose if you stopped waiting for meaning to appear? What would you build if you finally accepted that no one else is coming to define your life for you? What would your actions look like if you knew they were the only thing that could give your existence weight and significance? These aren't easy questions, but they're the only questions that matter. And maybe this is what we've missed all along. Maybe the point isn't to find meaning, but to become the kind of person who creates it. Not because they were told to, not because they were chosen, but because they chose themselves. Living without excuses, how owning your choices changes everything once you embrace the idea that meaning is made, not found. There's one final barrier that stands in your way of excuses. The moment we realize we are free, responsible, and unbound by any external script, our instincts scream for shelter. And we find it in excuses. I can't because of my upbringing. I'm not ready. They wouldn't understand. It's just not the right time. Excuses are incredibly seductive because they give us a temporary sense of relief. They let us off the hook. They help us avoid the terrible weight of radical accountability. But Sartre offers no room for that. In his world, excuses are just lies we tell ourselves to dodge the truth. We are what we choose. Nothing more, nothing less. To live authentically, we must kill our excuses, not negotiate with them, not soften them. We must destroy them, because every excuse is a step away from freedom and a step towards self-deception. Sartre calls this bad faith the act of lying to yourself, pretending you don't have a choice when you do. Pretending you're just a role, just a waiter, just a student, just a parent, just a victim of circumstance. But you are never just anything. You are always more. You are always free. Even in the most restrictive situations, you still choose how you relate to them. You choose your attitude. You choose your response. And that choice, no matter how small, is the birthplace of your power. Think about it. The moment you stop hiding behind excuses is the moment your life becomes terrifyingly real. You can no longer say, I didn't become who I wanted because of them. There is no them. There's only you. And this is why most people never take full ownership of their lives. Because it's easier to be a character in someone else's story than to be the author of your own. It's easier to blame the world than to face it with open eyes. It's easier to wait for permission than to declare your own direction. But what if you stopped waiting? What if you looked at the messiness of your life, the regrets, the unfinished dreams, the compromises, and said, I chose this, and I can choose it. I can start again. Imagine the clarity that would bring. Imagine the strength. That's not weakness. That's transformation. That's real freedom. Not the kind you talk about in theory, but the kind you live, breath by breath, moment by moment. Sartre never said this would be easy. In fact, he knew it would be brutal. But he also knew it would be worth it. Because when you take ownership of your choices, you open the door to change. You stop being a victim of life and start becoming its co-creator. You stop fearing failure because you understand that failure is part of authorship. It's part of the risk you must take to live a real life, one that's yours, not inherited, not borrowed, not copied. So now I leave you with the most important question of all. What are you still pretending not to choose? What excuses are you clinging to that protect you from the truth of your freedom? And what would your life look like if you shattered those excuses and took full responsibility for your existence starting today? Because here's the final truth Sartre gives us: no one cares. No one is watching. No one is coming to rescue you. And that changes everything. It means you are free. It means you are responsible. It means your life is yours to build or to waste. The choice is and always has been yours. Now, what will you do with it?